What is the history of creativity, and what does creativity look like in today's church? Let's dig in. Hey ministry leader, welcome to this episode of Your Visuals Matter. In this podcast, we're talking directly to ministry leaders who are looking for creative ways to visually communicate the gospel through graphics and video. So how do you use visual media at your church or at your ministry? You might not have a creative team at all. You might have creatives on staff, but they might be completely overwhelmed with the workload, or you might be a part of that overwhelmed team. If this is you, you're not alone. Together, we are a community. I'll be your guide. I'll be your Yoda as we go on a journey on this season of the podcast to help get you up to speed on where your church or ministry should be when it comes to using visual media content at your church. Your visuals matter. The graphics and video that you put on your screens, they make a difference. In order to reach the people you want to reach in your community, your visuals matter. All right, so let's jump in. In this week's episode of the show, we're going to continue with a foundation. Last week, we looked at how the Bible visually communicates the gospel. This week, we're going to be going on a journey through time from biblical history to church history. So we're going to look at some of the most influential, super creative people throughout the history of the church. Long before the culture we live in today of motion loops and mini movies and graphics, the early church for 2,000 years has been telling the story of Jesus in creative ways. We have the greatest story to ever be told. Jesus is the way. How can we learn from the history of creativity in the church to be creative and to visually communicate the gospel? We'll dive into that topic right after this. Are you looking for reliable printing for your visuals? Well, check out our friends at Outreach.com. As a preferred printing partner for over 20,000 churches worldwide, they have everything you need. From postcards to banners to mailers, Outreach is here to help you reach more with custom printing. Your visuals matter because your message matters. Make your message stand out with Outreach.com. Hey friends, this week we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to share with you about an 8-minute talk from a creative mentor to many, my friend Gary Molander. This is a short talk from a previous SALT conference. Big thank you to Luke McElroy and the SALT team for allowing us to use this video in this episode of the podcast. If you're an overwhelmed team, if you're on staff or you might be a volunteer in the creative ministry area at your church, or you might be on a ministry staff somewhere, please check out SALT Conference and SALT University. My friends on that team are doing such a great job. You can check them out at saltcommunity.com. So I'm going to share a powerful video from Gary Molander at SALT on the history of creativity in the church. Then I'm going to chat with my friend Phil Bowdle. Phil is the Vice President of Marketing at the Slingshot Group. He's also the author of Rethink Communication. And Phil has some great insight into the church now and the church of the future. What does creativity in the future of the church look like? We'll talk about that with Phil. So we'll hear from Gary first, then Phil. Check this out.
Long before CCM, long before the Dove Awards, long before motion loops and video downloads, and long before the words worship and music were synonymous, there was the early church. There was these smaller groups of people who were responding to one event. It was the event where the God-man didn't stay dead. And so they would gather in homes and they would meet kind of at the intersection of inspiration and mission and a little fear. In the early church, we discover a hymn that theologians and historians actually believe was a chant. Some of you may know what it is. It's Philippians 2, 5 through 11. And so these smaller communities calling themselves the Way would get together in homes and they would chant Philippians 2, 5 through 11, which says this: have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped. But he emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, and being made in the likeness of men. And being found in the appearance of a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And my sense is the passion begins to rise in the chant right about here. For this reason also God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And they chanted in homes, and we sing in buildings. But no matter what the style, we have in common the fact that we continue to point to Jesus the Christ. Later in the year 150 AD, a church father named Justin Martyr explained to those outside of Christianity what an order of worship was like. No one knew. And so Justin Martyr, he called them the pagans. And he said, I'm going to tell you what one of these church things is like. You ready for this? This is great. On the day called Sunday, there is a gathering together in the same place of all who live in a given city or rural district. The memoirs of the apostles or the writings of the prophets are read as long as time permits. Then when the reader ceases, the president or presider in a discourse admonishes and urges the imitation of these good things. Next, we all rise together and we send up prayers. Bread is presented, and wine and water. And those who have the means and are willing to give what they will, and all of the proceeds are deposited with the president, who in a word becomes the protector of all in need. On a night like this, you can almost taste and smell a little bit of the remnant of what Justin Martyr was talking about in AD 150. It's pretty powerful. And then there was Constantine around 312 AD. This is the Roman emperor who first gained political clout as a Christian. Please hear the weight of this statement I'm about to make. A Roman emperor became a Christian. His name is Constantine, and when he began to follow Christ, the spaces of worship actually began to change a little bit from the home church to something a little larger. Now he built 9 churches, and they were based on the plan of the Basilica, which is the Roman law court. Some of the churches were the actual Roman law court. So let me set that for you. There were people in a room who had recently been tried by the Romans for a capital crime as Christians, who were now worshiping in the same room under an emperor who was a Christian. You want to be part of something that only God can do? 312 AD. There were no pews in the church, so people had to stand. And worshipers simply moved around and they followed the action of the service. And so they went from scripture readings to prayers to processionals and then to the sermon. And friends, the tools and the trappings, completely different than what we have today. But Jesus the Christ remains at the center of it all. And there was the medieval church. Walking into a medieval church was like entering what one historian has called a womb of sacred imagery and art, like a birthplace of it. Carved and painted walls and structures and tapestries along the walls and inside the altars. And there were stained glass windows and mosaics and even tombs on the floor. And they all spoke of the divine things as powerfully as the word and the sacrament. Now, let me say that again. Art spoke with the same authority as the word and the sacrament in the medieval church. Above everything. If you just look up, go ahead and look up. What do you see? There's black. When they looked up, they saw a great crucifix. And then at somewhere, somehow in there, they saw the scene of the judgment day. And so when they looked up, they saw the whole story of redemption. Different spaces than most of us would ever create, right? I get it. But they, like us, look to Jesus the Christ at the center of it all. And 400 years later, friends, here we are, 600 years later, 700, whatever it is. We all, every one of us in some way contribute. I want you to get this. We all in some way contribute to helping other people see God. And you stand in a line that is 2,000 miles long of people who have done that. And so when you think about our worship wars and when you think about arguing over what mic to put on the kick drum, I just kind of laugh because 2,000 years and we all do it differently, and that's awesome, but we all still point to Jesus the Christ. It is him we point to. He's the only story worth telling, right? He's the only common thing among all of the crazy uncommon between us. And so I invite you in this moment to just breathe and to take a journey with us that will not feel normal.
Phil, welcome, man. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Carl, good to be here.
Man, always a pleasure. I feel like I should put you on the payroll by now as many times as you've been on with me. And man, we do the conference circuit together and stuff like that too. So man, what a privilege. Thanks so much for coming on again.
Man, love always connecting with you. Anybody that's got a heart for the church and for creatives is a friend. So count you as a friend, man. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So kind of give people a state of where you are. So tell people where you serve and kind of give us an update.
Yeah. So for 12 years, I served as a communications and then creative arts pastor at Westridge Church in Northwest Atlanta. That opened up a ton of just incredible learning opportunities and great ministry there. And through that, I got a chance to get connected with a ton of churches all over the country and kind of expand some of the coaching consulting work I do as well. Wrote a book called Rethink Communication that still is keeping me connected to this communication space as well. And then a couple of years ago, started my work with Slingshot Group because I wanted to, I really asked the question, like 10 years from now, what will I be proud of that I dug into and invested in? And I just was really burdened by what's happening in church space and creative space of it's not a healthy, thriving place for a lot of people. And so I just wanted to make a dent into helping make that a better, healthy, thriving place for more churches. So that got me connected with them. And so I've done a lot of work with them. And now I'm in a VP of marketing role where I get to help play a role in shaping the content and the work we do there. And so do a ton with that. And then as well as just the continued kind of coaching and assessment work that I do with churches all over the place.
So as you work with these churches and kind of have a lay of the land temperature of what's going on, kind of give me a status. What is the state of creativity? Just kind of a broad state of creativity in the church right now.
Yeah, good question. If you remember those old Facebook statuses that's like that so you could show your status. If status of creativity in the church was like an old Facebook status, I think we'd have to say it's complicated. I think so. Yeah. It's complicated because I think for the person connecting to the church, they're connecting to the church in very creative and new ways. And for the leaders in the church trying to actually reflect the creativity of the creator, I think the status for that person, for most of them over the last couple of years, is they're just exhausted. Mm-hmm. That exhaustion and kind of that cumulative trauma over the last couple of years it's been really challenging. And a lot of the people that had a heart for creativity have then taken that and really have gotten burned out, or some of the joy of that creative work has really gotten kind of lost because of the grind of the last couple of years, that cumulative trauma of all the pace of change and what's happening in our culture, all that stuff. So I think it's complicated in a lot of ways. And I think you could find churches all across the board that would say they have the answer to how creativity should be. And I think you could find every bit of reflection of creative usage or not across all different kinds of church. So it's complicated. That's the status.
Are a lot of people leaving? Have you seen a lot of people leave their roles at churches, or, are they staying in the game? What does that look like?
I would say not only within the church, but I think across all fields, across all jobs, people are leaving. Yeah, I think it's like 40% of people have considered in the last 3 months about considering taking a new role somewhere. And so the landscape of your job looks really different. COVID really impacted that because all of a sudden, where you live, what you do, the freedoms you have or don't have are all top of mind. Where before that may have not been as top of mind as before. So there's been a lot of churn in the church space. And I think especially creatives, honestly, what's interesting is for years I heard people say the church should be one of the leading forces in creative work and creative ministry. Well, guess what? The business and the corporate world saw that and saw a lot of the creatives doing amazing work in church space, and all of a sudden started paying those people double the amount or more and gave them more freedom, more flexibility. For better or worse, whatever it is a fact for a lot of people. And so I think a lot of those people have changed, or how they work in creative ministry does look different. The context looks different.
What is the average stay for a creative staff member at a church?
I don't feel like I know. I think by the time we would study that, it would have already changed. There is, and so much of that is a reflection of what kind of culture, what kind of church they're in, what kind of environment they're in. It's not as long as we'd want it to be, for sure. I think I think everybody would want and desire people to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
But I think the expectations that everybody has around the long haul looks different than it used to.
If I had to guess, I just want to see your opinion on a random ballpark. If I had to guess, I would say 3 to 5 years is how long a content creator or a creative person at a church is staying.
Yeah. My gut would be that that's actually generous.
Too high? Yep.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Dang, man, tough.
I don't like the answer to that.
But, I know.
Yeah. But honestly, we'll get into that some in this conversation. But I think the content creator that's just the doer, that's just executing things, there's always going to be a churn there. There's always going to be a slightly sunnier zip code or better, better payday somewhere else or freedom that you get somewhere else. There's always going to be a churn there. But what I'm more burdened by is, what are the leaders doing? What are the leaders doing that are developing leaders in this space so that they see hope and potential and a future to say, I want to set up camp here. I want to be in it for the long haul and build something that lasts and that matters.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of begin, and then I'm going to hit you on the back end of this conversation with the same question. Okay,
Bring it.
So why do your visuals matter? We're talking about creative folks who create content for the church, graphics, video, and then implement those visuals out into whether that's a screen in a worship service or a small screen on social media. Why do those people matter? The positions matter? And why do you communicating the gospel visually? Why does that matter?
Yeah, I think your visuals matter because your message matters, right? It sounds overly simple, but that really is the heart of it. I mean, when everything you do communicates something, it's really imperative and important that if everything communicates something, that you're communicating the thing that you intend to communicate. And when it comes to why your visuals matter, is because we want to make sure that we're shining the spotlight on the right thing, and that we're making sure that we're saying, this is what I hope people hear. This is what I hope people see and hope they experience. And so that's not something you do, reactively or half-heartedly. You do it proactively and intentionally because it matters. Because when you do things that are distracting, you're not just distracting their attention, you're distracting their engagement with Jesus, with the gospel. Like that's a responsibility we have. And so, that's why it matters. I'm not probably one to say that's the most important thing in what you're doing. I am more about saying, how do you help identify and remove barriers that are keeping people from engaging and taking the next step? And so visuals can be a barrier, or they can be a blessing. They can be a way to engage and enhance, or they can be a distraction. And so I think that's why it matters, because our message matters.
Good. All right. So let's kind of get into some content that you've shared at conferences and things like that. So talk to me about some shifts that you've seen in creative ministry as of late. Kind of set the stage there.
Yeah, I mean, so much. It probably has changed since the last time I've shared or worked on, reflecting on some of this stuff. But we've referenced one thing, and I think it's probably one of the most important, is that I'm seeing the need for and the shift of the creative doer to the creative leader. COVID made a big impact on this, because all of a sudden, some of these people that were serving on creative teams and on staff that were in the back row with their arms crossed, kind of just trying to keep their head down and do their thing, all of a sudden were the most important person in the room. That Sunday was dependent upon, that person had to all of a sudden shape so much of what, tens or hundreds or thousands of people were going to experience. And that, that's not a doer responsibility. That's a leader responsibility. And a lot of the expectations of senior leadership, of senior pastors, of organizations, all of a sudden are not, I just need somebody to do the things. They are actually needing a leader. And for that person that suddenly has a seat on the table may or may not be ready for that. And that's the reality. And that's the challenge, I think. But, we actually need creative leaders to be able to lead not just what they do, but lead something bigger than themselves. Something that is actually saying, hey, I'm not just thinking about the visuals that I create. I'm thinking about the team of creators that are creating the visuals that I make. I'm thinking about how I can engage other volunteers and other outsourced options and freelancers and contractors and all that stuff. Like it takes you leading something bigger than yourself. And because otherwise what happens is people burn out and they leave within 2 years, or they leave within 2 months because they can't handle the expectations of doing all the things that are required. So we need more creative leaders, not just creative doers on that. So that's one big shift. I think the next one is really important when it comes to bossing versus coaching. When you think of leaders, the boss manager is not getting as far as the coach. So when I think of it, I think just in today's workplace economy in general, especially in the church, bossing just doesn't get you where coaching will go. And when we think about the best moments that we all have been led, it's not somebody that's telling us what to do. It's not the boss, it's not that manager that's just trying to run you through the system. It's somebody that sees something in you that you may not even see in yourself, that's pushing you and thinking about what's best for you and for where you're going, thinking about the role that you play in the team and how you can best be set up for success. So I think for us that we all need a coach in our life. We all need somebody that is saying, okay, I see this in you. I want to help push you there. I want to stretch you here. So we need to be moving away from that boss manager mentality and move into the coaching leader on that, because that's going to get you further than bossing ever will go on that. And we all have the horror stories to remember where bossing can lead you. So I think that's another big one. And probably organizationally, that one of the areas that I'm spending the most time with churches or teams that are saying, hey, we don't know what's broken, but something's broken and it's not working right, is really their organizational model, for how things are structured and fit. And that's more of that shift from the Sunday ministry to more of a central ministry. And Sunday ministry worked when all the focus was on just that 1 hour that happened each week. You built that around usually the worship pastor who was shaping that, who had the most tenure or most stage, like stage attention and all that stuff like that was built around that. And so everything else was kind of the back burner to support that. Well, all of a sudden now you have ministries that are saying, I need access to creative ministry. I need access to visuals. I need access to communications. I need access to all that stuff. So if a lot of churches are feeling that tension of saying that Sunday ministry is not getting us where we need to go, because it may look great on Sunday, but it looks awful on social on Monday, or it doesn't feel connected to what's happening in kids ministry or in this other environment. So I think that more holistic approach is causing us to actually rethink how the organization is structured and what team roles you need, or what leaders' scope of influence looks like.
And you're talking more like, how do we structure our delivery of our message beyond Sunday? Not necessarily a multi-campus, I have a central team model that pushes out to the, if I think central ministry, I'm almost thinking I'm at a multi-site and I'm on the central team. That is the main campus that pushes the content out to the other campuses. What you're really talking about is going beyond Sunday, is not just letting Sunday be the end all be all, but how do we capture people throughout the week as well?
Well, I think it's both. Because, where if you because I've talked to many of the kids ministry leaders, they're saying, hey, it's great that our Sunday services are awesome, but we're leading those kids right now and we have no connection to what worship looks like. Compared to that, there's no
access
continuity.
To the same team that big church has.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So the doing things centrally, whether it's multi-campus or not, I think it's saying, a huge heart of mine is creative is not just it's not an ad agency. It's not just an execution team. It's a ministry. And so your role as creative leaders is to partner with other ministries to help both of you be successful, to accomplish the ministry and the mission that God's called you to.
Right.
So you're missing opportunities, and we're seeing missed opportunities when the communications or creative team is not hand in hand with the other ministries to say, how can we help you be successful? How can we take the things that God's wired and used us for and can help you and help your ministry thrive on that. So it's putting and positioning that creative team in a central ministry way to say, how do we holistically be the ministry to the rest of the ministries as well, so that we can best partner with them? And that just goes a lot further than that hour on a Sunday.
So anything else you want to speak to there as far as how churches are restructuring how they staff up, or how they're structuring their internal teams?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk all day on that. I mean, that's because, like I said, the number one thing that when when a pastor or executive pastor connects with me or talks to me, it's usually they have some kind of pain point with this area because something doesn't work. And sometimes that's a people issue. Sometimes that's a system issue. And sometimes that's just a rhythm issue of how the people in the systems work and how they connect on a week to week, month to month, trimester basis, all that stuff. So that's a lot of what I love to do to unlock that, but probably the number one thing that I would say layered onto that is you really for the needs of what the church has right now, whether you're 200 or 2,000 or 20,000, it doesn't matter. You need a leader in place of a couple key areas like worship, production, video, communications, project management. Like those are all areas that I'd say are really essential to say you need somebody that you can say, I'm worried about this so that you don't have to be. And that doesn't have to be a staff member. Ideally it is, because the needs of that often exceed what a volunteer is able to do. But sometimes that's not an option. So it's more about saying somebody feels the weight and ownership of owning and leading those areas, because without a leader in place, just so many things get dropped. And so I think that's not just that's almost become a expectation of the current reality of where we are. We need leaders in those seats.
So what does the structure of the employment look like, or the team look like? Meaning, is it all full time? Is it part time? Is it outsourced? Is it freelance? Is it contract? Is it a mixture? What are you seeing churches do when it comes to creating visual content for their church?
What I'm seeing most churches do is say, what changed? Because what we did before isn't working anymore. This part-time role of 10 hours that we've always been able to fill can't get filled anymore. It's been 6 months. Or, we've always had a pipeline of this kind of role. Where'd all the talent go on that? That's not a unique problem. If that's you, that's everybody right now, church or corporate, regardless, that's the challenge of everybody. So I think what I'm seeing is the leader, not the creative doers, but the creative leaders are thinking and need to be thinking more holistically about how they meet the needs of week to week, month to month ministry. And sometimes that means you need a hire, that's a full-time or a part-time role that somebody is responsible for, accountable for. They are in a staff role. But often what it means is that you can't hire your way out of meeting all the needs of the typical church, because you're going to burn them out. So if you don't equip that hire or that person with other ways to round out their team that doesn't necessarily have a health insurance charge and, payroll and all those things, like you need to be leveraging how those people lead so that you can engage volunteers, outsourcing options, freelance options, contract options. I mean, that's a huge lift of what you do for a lot of churches that say, I can't hire the person, but I can hire this team. And that's a huge blessing for a lot of people that say, I need that. We need to meet the needs, but we got to meet them in a new and a different way. So that's a few ways that I'm seeing people do it.
So one thing that we found over the years is that we thought we would serve more smaller churches with no team at all. Mm-hmm. And what we found is we not only serve those, but we serve medium, large ministries, everybody across the spectrum, because on this issue of creativity and creating visual media, reaching people visually with the gospel, they're completely overwhelmed. Even if they have a team, they're completely overwhelmed. There's so many needs for this that they just cannot. Their internal team can't do it all. And so we find a lot that even though sometimes they might have 1, 2, or multiple staff members doing creative work, they still hire us to the tune of a whole lot of money and projects in order to meet the needs, which is crazy. I don't know if that's just. Do you think that that's just the needs of creativity going up, where we're in such a media saturated, video and graphic saturated world? Do you think? What do you attribute that to? Do you think?
I definitely attribute some of that to the needs are greater. I mean, you could fill up most of your time just by trying to engage social media at the pace and the need of what you could accomplish just in that space, let alone every ministry environment, what you do every Sunday, all that. I think that's a piece. Probably the thing that I see as one of the greater issues though, is that because there aren't enough leaders asking the questions of not what can we do versus what should we do? What's the wise way to invest the time, talent, resources we have to maximize the impact? So you have a lot of churches probably trying to do too much with too little, and they're doing none of it well. But they're adding a ton of noise to what they're doing. So I think that's what we gotta sometimes do is say, not can we, but should we? And what do we invest most of our resources in to be great? For example, I'd rather most churches spend a little bit less time on their PowerPoint templates or their pro presenter slides and a little bit more time on uniquely telling the story of what God's doing in and through their church, through testimonies, whether that's video or in person or what, tell stories, those things. And sometimes it takes when you're stuck in the weeds, it's really hard to get up into the clouds and look down and see, okay, what are we missing? And I think that's what we're missing. I think we're asking sometimes the wrong questions and we're getting stuck in a rut that we got to break out of to say, what are the things that matter the most, and how do we enhance what we do there and put our energy and efforts into that?
Should churches spend more money on creativity than they are?
I don't know if I know the answer to that question because I think it's so subjective. There's some that I'm like, that are probably spending too much. There's probably some that are not even investing in it at all.
Yeah. And
so I think God's too big to limit, one playbook for every church to say this is the right or wrong. I think that how every church would answer that. I think that the question more is, do your values reflect your budget? And based off of that side, like is what you're trying to do as a church reflective of what you're investing in this area? And that might be too much. For a lot of times it's too little. It's an area that has been on the back burner for a long time. And it's never mattered enough to have a line item in the budget to say this actually can be a way to enhance ministry on that.
So do you think that even if they are at a place where they're trying to put it in the budget, do you think that they're trying to solve it all with one person? Well, if we get this one person, they're not saying the word unicorn, but this is the unicorn that can solve all of our creative needs. And maybe they can't find that person, or if they find that person's fried out in a matter of a year or two. Is that true?
Oh, it's very true. Yeah. When I've been blown away of sometimes when I've, in the work we do at Slingshot, I mean, we're often stepping into an environment with somebody that's in a desperate place of, we need a leader, we need a person. And it's funny, like sometimes when they'll describe a communications director that they need or some kind of leader, especially in the communication space, they'll describe somebody we need somebody with corporate executive experience, somebody that is a great writer, that's run, $1 million campaigns, that has done, that has a master's degree, all this stuff. And they're like, and we got, should feel really good about salary. We're at 40 to 45 and, we're excited to see, what we can find. It's like, you're describing somebody that doesn't exist. Yeah. And honestly, you're raising the bar so high that nobody
and if
can
they
reach
exist, they're not coming for that money.
No,
it's not.
No, exactly. And often, those people are people that have built their roles around leading teams of 20 people. And then they step into a church where they're saying, hey, you're the solution. You're the Lone Ranger. You're the one to play savior about fixing all these issues. Mm-hmm. So I think that's totally a major concern and issue. And that's why it takes leaders having a more holistic approach for meeting the needs in various ways so that it's not all on one person.
I think we can be quick to slam the pastor or the leadership of the church, but I do think that that COVID really opened the eyes of pastors to which you mentioned earlier, and now all of a sudden the media guy is the very dependent on person. And I was just at a conference this week that there was a pastor on stage that expressed that the realization that we value this position or these multiple positions too little. They're just as much a leader as any stage presence we would have, and we need to pour more energy into that. So I think that. Well, let me ask the question: do you see pastors realizing that more and more, that okay, maybe we need to make a shift here, that maybe we have undervalued, maybe we need to pour more energy into, maybe we don't need to go after a unicorn, maybe we need multiple people? Are pastors seeing that shift, or leadership in general?
Yeah, I think I'd love to say everybody does. I think a few are.
I don't think everybody.
There are some. I think a lot it takes a translator sometimes to put the mirror up against what they're talking about and saying, and say, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what that would look like, and who's out there, and what you're actually describing. Is that what you guys
have done a lot at Slingshot? Kind of been that mirror of you're not being realistic here.
That's 99% of the time we're doing that. 99% of the time. And I think what's the hardest part about all of this is, what breaks my heart is when I think about when I talk to some of the leaders out there that are describing what they say they need. They're describing somebody that they themselves couldn't hire for that role, or like it well beyond reasonable expectations. And a lot of churches are missing out on. They're trying to buy the leader. They're trying to just find the person, pluck them, put them in place. But the best leaders are built. They're not bought. The best leaders are coached and developed, and they're people that they're like. I mean, I was one of those people that was a stupid teenager, with a guitar, that somebody said, "Hey, I see something in you, and I see this ability in you. I want to coach you. I want to develop you." Like that was how I got started. It wasn't because I was the best person in the room. No, I was just available and somebody saw potential in me. And so I think we got to get back to developing and building leaders and playing the long game with them, not just expecting somebody to come in on day one and be savior and solve all of our needs.
Good. All right. So I want to hit you on a couple of trends before I let you go. So talk to me about trends you're seeing when it comes to visual media. Is video it? Is video the new communications? Talk to me about that.
That's exactly how I would say it. Is I think when you thought about how you communicate a message, the average church was thinking about words in a service on a Sunday. And I think now we've got to say the greatest opportunities we have to communicate and engage people with the gospel are not inside the walls of a church. They're outside. And how people are engaged digitally is through video. And there are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. They have some really smart people spending millions of dollars studying how they can keep our eyes on a screen and keep our attention engaged. That's not happening through words. That's happening through reels. That's happening through video on that. And so I think when you say, how do I solve my communication issue at a church? You've got to think video first, because video is the new communications.
Yeah. So I have a stat here. I don't know if this was in your notes or mine, but 82% of global internet traffic in 2022 came from video. I think that number is probably up. I had a stat the other day that 24 hours of an average person's week is consuming video content. 24 hours, an entire day of your week, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 30 seconds here, adds up to 24 hours in your week, every single week. Nothing but consuming video. So here's a question. Does it all have to be super produced, or it is raw, selfie kind of video? Is it a mixture of? I think it's a mixture of, but I want you to speak to it. When is there a place for the quality line? How do I judge where my quality line needs to be?
Yeah, what I would answer that with is it's about if your quality is a distraction, then it probably needs to be addressed. But if your quality is what you're worshiping around what you're doing, but the content is awful, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good it looks if your message is off. And I think for us, it's not about quantity and or even quality sometimes of the production of it. It's about, am I helping somebody solve a problem? And sometimes that problem, what we learn from social media, sometimes that problem isn't some like massive, like life change kind of thing. Sometimes that's entertainment. sometimes that's just making me laugh and engaging me in that. That's what a lot of reels are and what's getting a lot of attention right now. But as a church, that's not solely our role. Hopefully we don't take ourselves too seriously that we can't laugh at ourselves and have a little fun. I think that's an okay kind of thing for us to actually reflect maybe a little bit more of than what we're doing right now. But I think for us, it's how are we helping people solve a problem? And you can do that through a, Facebook Live, a selfie video, all that stuff. And as long as people can see you and hear you clearly where that's not the distraction, then that's going to translate. And we have plenty of leaders and influencers that you could point to say, oh yeah, it's not about their excellent quality about it. It's their message. It's what they're saying and how they're saying it that's translating to me. So I think that's what we got to focus our attention on. Don't spend 20 grand on cameras if you're not spending 20 minutes on crafting your message. So that's what we got to focus on.
So do you think that there is a time and place to take your quality to the next level? Here's what I mean by that is maybe social media is very immediate, raw, can be very, very low quality if you need it to be, as long as people can kind of see and hear you, the audio level's good or quality is good. But maybe in your worship experience where the whole congregation is looking at it, is that the place to bring your level up? Whereas you might need to staff for that role where they haven't in the past. They've let the secretary or an intern do graphics they're not a designer at all. Or I know cousin so-and-so that does video and it looks really bad. I mean, some churches have to do what they have. I'm not trying to pick on everybody, but I am saying from your perspective, is there a time and place to pour more energy into quality?
Yes. I think you wouldn't entrust the staff members, son that, took a class in high school with the church budget, right? Like that's a dangerous situation there. And the same way you should hold the value of what visually you're communicating and what you're communicating in general inside and outside the walls of a church with somebody that's empowered and equipped and able to be able to do that well. But I think so yes, on that side, but also we can't worship perfection.
Right.
We can't chase that because, I, as a recovering, perfectionistic person of Enneagram 1 wired, want to make everything better. I mean, that I learned real early chasing perfection is going to be a recipe towards burnout. Yeah. But I think if we can say as churches, how do we do the best we can with what we have? I think good things happen from that, because there's a responsibility for us to say, we got to do the best we can with this.
Okay. So where are we going? What does the future of creativity look like in the church?
Man, you give me some just layup easy questions, like just look at the crystal ball and see that. Honestly, I said this before. What does future creativity in the church look like? I don't know. I think if anybody years ago would have said, this is what the next couple of years will look like, I think we all would have been a little bit surprised. So
do you see that people staying longer than that 2 or 3 year mark? Do you see us making the shifts and changes to culture to keep people longer? Do you see quality going up? Anything like that?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think what I hope, I guess, I don't know for a lot of it, but what I can hope is that we don't look at creativity with a factory type of mindset. That, I hope that we can actually just reclaim the beauty of creativity, where creativity isn't just an act of obligation or something we have to do, but it's something we get to do, and it's an act of worship. And when we can do that, I think it creates a culture and an environment where creatives that are starving for and hungry for that and see a place in that, but don't see a culture that they can step into to reflect that. I think if we can get back to reclaiming that side, the true beauty of creativity and art, we're actually reflecting the creator God, who we're reflecting his character when we're doing that. And so I think that takes effort for us to move away from that factory mindset and look at saying, what, at the end of the day, what are we trying to do here, and how do we put our focus on the right things? Because I think it can and should be an act of worship on this. It should be something that helps people lean into and engage with the gospel, instead of just something that people look back and say, that's creative. Like, I hope it's not that. I hope it's not just something that people say, oh, that's done really well. That's not going to get you as far as creatively putting Jesus on display. And I think if we get to back to that, the future of creativity looks really, really strong.
Man, I love that point, because I think that, we've both worked in very, very large churches with influence. And the cool factor, I don't think we need to look awesome just to look awesome. We've got to communicate the gospel. It's the gospel that saves. It's the Holy Spirit that moves, not our graphics and video, not how good that is. Although, I'm in the business of making design and video look great. But if the message is not paramount, if the gospel is not paramount, who cares? That I think needs to be the driving point, is, are we communicating the message of the gospel well? All right, so I told you I would end on this too. So let's wrap this around with, now that we've talked about everything, why do your visuals matter? How would you encourage a church that their visual media, their visuals matter?
I'll say it the same way of your visuals matter because your message matters. And if your message is pointing towards anything other than putting Jesus on display, I think you're missing it. Yeah. So regardless of colors or shapes or style or anything like that, I think we have a responsibility to shine the spotlight on Jesus and make sure that everything we do, not just our creativity, but everything we do in the church is pointing towards that. Because when we do that, we're not counting on our skills or our best effort to be able to build the church. We're putting our focus on our Savior, who said he will build the church. And so let's put our focus on that, and let's put our visuals on that, and make sure that that's the thing that matters the most.
Yeah, awesome. Phil, thank you so much for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Carl. Always a pleasure.
If you're a creative in the church, improving your craft and staying inspired are often the two most difficult parts of your job. SALT University is an education platform that gives you immediate access to teaching from some of the greatest teachers in the world. Your whole team can access our large catalog of video training for one low fee, and each person is able to focus on their favorite subject while learning at their own pace. We're here to help increase your creative and technical potential so that you can be equipped to use art as the vehicle God intended it to be. SALT University. Modern training for the modern church. Find out more at saltu.tv.
Hey friends, as we wrap this week's episode, I want to end each episode of the show with a clear, simple takeaway. So here's your church visuals tip of the week. You contribute to helping other people see God. Let me say that again. You contribute to helping other people see God. Just as Gary said in the video that I shared earlier in this episode, you stand in a line that's 2,000 miles long of people who have done that. You as a servant, you as a ministry leader, your work points people to Jesus. We are charged with communicating the gospel just like millions of Christians that have come before us. Your church visuals, your graphics, your media content, your videos, all the media that you put on your screen, it matters. It doesn't just need to look awesome, though it does need to look great. It needs to communicate the gospel of Jesus Christ. If it doesn't, it's worthless. The goal is not just to look great. The goal is salvation and spiritual growth of the people under your care, right? Your visuals matter. Be sure to like this episode of the show if you would, and leave a comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on social media at Church Visuals. If you want to reach the people you want to reach for Jesus, your visuals matter. I'll see you next week. Your Visuals Matter has been a podcast presentation of Church Visuals. Executive produced by Carl Barnhill, edited by AJ Schubert, title and show graphics by Angie Lomas. For more resources to help you visually communicate the gospel, visit churchvisuals.com.